Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Wood Elves against the Force of the Tomb Kings on the map, the Devastation of Ostermark. So, for my composition here, I did decide to simply try something out, because I don't really know what works and what doesn't work against the Tomb Kings when playing as Wood Elves, and so I brought a composition with mostly the constructs in mind. When you play as any of the other factions, really, the constructs are a big problem, and I thought that, well, the Wood Elves should be very well equipped to shut them down. Wood Elves have some of the best anti-large units in the game, and they have very good shooting. They obviously have a snare, despite the fact that Prey of Anathema has been reduced to only 3 charges. It's still a very potent snare, so the Wood Elves are really well kitted out to deal with monsters, so I thought, oh, I'll be set. And so I did decide to bring this sort of very anti-large heavy build. Out here on the flank, we are already kind of getting shot at a little bit by the skeleton archers. And it's something worth keeping in mind is the fact that the Tomb Kings have quite a bit of shooting, and they can definitely just pressure your backline pretty effectively. So for my Lord, I did decide to bring the Glady, one of the best Lord picks for the Wood Elves, honestly. She has very solid melee attack, okay melee defense, great speed, can of course pick away at enemy units with all that shooting, decent charge bonus on the Eagle Mount, and of course good old Prey of Anathema, as well as the Arrows of Kurnus. So just a very flexible, very fast Lord that's very hard to shut down for the Tomb Kings. Down on the ground, we do have the Branch Wraith in support, and as I've mentioned, and I say just about every time, I do think the Branch Wraith is in many ways almost a mandatory pick for the Wood Elves. And that is because of this fancy little buff called the Call of the Woods, as well as decent melee stats. It can really kind of anchor your line. It has 60 armor, 20% physical resistance. It can really anchor your line, hold the fort down, and it does bring a bunch of useful utility spells, such as Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma and Earthblood. Not thinking much of the Tomb King infantry, I actually did not bring the Penumbral Pendulum, and this would end up costing me pretty greatly in this game. The rest of my troops here are simply infantry and cavalry. The front line is composed of Eternal Guard with shields. Obviously, these guys can crush Ushabti pretty effectively. They have armor piercing, they've got anti-large, they've got good melee defense at 44, so even the Ushabti with their bonus against infantry will struggle. They've got that 40 their armor's not great, but they do have silver shields to hold out against enemy shooting, so they're just very, very strong against whatever the Tomb Kings bring. In my second line, I do have a unit of War Dancers. The War Dancers can, of course, they are immune to psychology, and they will slice and dice through cheap Tomb King infantry, and that's really the main reason I brought them. I was only thinking about the cheap Tomb King infantry, and I completely forgot about Tomb Guard, and that would definitely end up being a problem for me in this game. 3 units of Glady Guard with Starfire Shafts are there to shut down enemy monsters, but these guys, with the exception of the Regiment of Renowned Necrosphinx, they'll actually do really well against not just all of the monsters, but they'll do great against Tomb King Lords, who are all susceptible to fire. If we look here at Arkan, we can see that he does have fire weakness. He does have 25% fire weakness, probably because he's embalmed or something along those lines, and that will make him very susceptible to this archery fire. Behind that, we do have 2 units of War Dancers with Azar Spears. Once again, psychological immunity, crazy mobility at 46, good melee attack at 30. That's actually really solid for an anti-large unit. Melee defense at 49, and of course, great weapon strength with that bonus large of 23. These guys will absolutely slice and dice through monstrous troops very, very quickly. Out on the flanks, we do have 2 units of Wild Riders with shields. The shields mostly to zone away enemy shooting, and these guys can actually definitely lay the smackdown on enemy cavalry. They can lay, for most part, they can help tie down enemy troops. They can get rear charges, deal with that skirmishing potential that the Tomb Kings have, and be very, very potent. My opponent caught me completely by surprise, though. He brought a very, very wide build, definitely a little micro-intensive, but just the width of this build is going to be a huge problem for me in this game. Obviously, I deployed on a bottleneck to prevent my opponent from surrounding me, and that is definitely going to be a little bit of a benefit in this situation. Perhaps not a lifesaver, but definitely beneficial. And so it should help me a little bit. Now my opponent kind of anticipated that, deployed 3 units of Skeleton Horsemen in the back. His Lord is Arkan the Black, who is probably the best of the choices for the Tomb Kings. He is mounted only on a horse, so very cheap, and he actually only brought Fit of Buna, didn't even bother with the Spirit Leech. He also does have the Libra Mortis for physical resist. I definitely think this is a little bit of a mistake. One of Arkan's biggest strengths is actually his special items and his AoE sort of melee attack buffs and those sorts of things. The fact that my opponent stripped him down so much in this game is definitely, I think, a little bit of a mistake. Definitely invest, I think, a couple hundred more into Arkan just to get him a little more souped up. It would cost you like a unit of archers, nothing too bad. Nonetheless, my opponent's shooting contingent is massive. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of Skeleton Archers, one of which is the Blessed Legion of Thocht, which of course does have that armor sundering effect and extra range. They're already training fire, shooting at my war dancers, whittling them down, and really laying the hurt down on my unshielded units. In my turn, I'm trying to whittle them down with fire from the Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts, but of course they will struggle a little bit against, because these guys obviously don't break. My opponent's front line is composed of a mix of Skeleton Warriors as well as Tomb Guard, and the Tomb Guard are just going to lay the smackdown on my troops. They have huge melee defense, they have decent melee attack at 32, and monstrous weapons rank of 42, which against the badly armored Wood Elves is going to be absolutely crazy. You can also see some Skeleton Spears in the back. 5 units of Tomb Guard, just very, very hard for me to shut down. Sepulchral Stalkers, which I have actually not spotted yet because these guys are the stealth variant. The Poison Poison Imbuing King Nikesh's Scorpion Legion of Skeleton Spears. And as you can see, my opponent is definitely taking control of the high ground here with his Skeleton Archers, even as my low ground is definitely struggling. The Glade Guard are not having a good time of it. You can see I plow straight through with the Branch Wraith. I'm just trying to whittle down these Skeleton Archers, but it's definitely a huge challenge. My Glady up in the air, poking away, and I'm able to get these Wild Riders into the fray over there. Down here on the low ground, I have managed to pick off one of the units of the Skeleton Horsemen, and now I'm just kind of trying to zone them away with the War Dancers with Azrai Spears. My Wild Riders are up here, trying to shred through the Skeleton Archers, doing a great job of it. Over here, I will be able to kind of catch up these Skeleton Horsemen. Of course, one of the problems with the Skeleton cavalry units is they're so slow. They only have 76 speed, which is pretty terrible. Unfortunately for me, though, a Fit of Buna going down on my Wild Riders, and that is going to shred them and definitely bring them into the size. They will obviously still be able to cut through these Skeleton Archers very quickly, but it's definitely going to cripple them and make them very, very weak in the long run. In the meantime, Blade Guard with Starfire Shaft still trying to counteract that enemy backline, trying to shut down these Blessed Legion of Thoth, and definitely struggling in that function. I perhaps should have committed my Glady here just to shut these guys down in melee, and definitely... while things are going okay for me in the pits, you can see the War Dancers with Azrai Spears are definitely going to give me a little bit of an edge here, I think, in the fight. I do believe War Dancers with Azrai Spears can out-trade Tomb Guard. It's definitely not going to be an ideal situation. In the meantime, the Eternal Guard is kind of getting diced up by the Tomb Guard. You can see my Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts getting slaughtered. And up here, my opponent's Skeleton Horsemen are, despite getting kind of slugging out with the Wild Riders, getting pursued by the Wild Riders, are still definitely kind of healthy. With the support from Arkan, they could be a huge problem. You can see my Wild Riders do rout thanks to that Fit of Buna, but they actually managed to strip Arkan down quite a bit. They brought him down from full HP to almost nothing. But as you can see, that frontline fight definitely going very poorly. My opponent is keeping his Sepulchral Stalkers in reserve. I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps not really seeing an opportunity to push them through. And of course, I do still have these War Dancers with Azrai Spears ready to go. And if they get on top of those Sepulchral Stalkers, they will not be long for this world. Up here, my opponent does cast his Liber Mortis, granting his troops with 44% physical resist, and definitely hurting the chances of my Wild Riders. However, I do have the Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts firing into the fray here, trying to whittle down the Skeleton Horsemen, trying to whittle down Arkan the Black, and give my Wild Riders a fighting chance. Up here, my Wild Riders have returned from rout, and are plowing into the back of those Skeleton Archers. Their Frenzy is back up and running, and they are just chewing through these guys with incredible speed. Skeleton Archers have atrocious melee stats. So despite the fact that the Wild Riders are really in bad shape, they will actually be able to lay the smack down on these guys and take very little damage in return. Over here, the Eternal Guard is finally buckling, but there's not really much opportunity for my opponent to get good flanks. You can see my Branch Wraith routes as well to these Tomb Guard, but despite getting some surrounds and some slight holes here and there in my formation, my opponent is just not really able to plow through. Unfortunately for me, another Fate of Buna does go down. I simply don't have the Earthblood to heal it, so these Wild Riders are also kind of falling apart to the Skeleton Horsemen, to Arkan, and I'm definitely not in great shape. Wild Riders over here have taken a few losses, but are chewing through these Skeleton Archers. And now that Arkan is going to be a little more exposed, I'm definitely going to be able to whittle him down with the Starfire Shafts, which are unfortunately themselves being shot up by archers. And you can see this game is still going to drag on for quite a while. It's definitely not a great situation for me. You can see my Wild Riders here just routing off, and however, I do catch Arkan with the Prey Van of Threma in a terrible position, and now the Starfire Shafts are going to be able to come in hot and heavy and really start whittling him down. With the fire damage on them, they were going to be doing 25% bonus. He does have good armor, but no, obviously the Starfires are armor piercing, and they definitely do quite a bit of hurt. I do also cast an Arrow of Kurnus on him, just trying to get a little bit of additional damage, trying to break him. And you can see by the time my opponent realizes he's almost dead, it's definitely a little too late. He will get a lovely charge here into the Wild Riders, but once I get that surround on him, the Wild Riders should be able to chew him up with incredible speed. Down here in the pits, things are definitely not going great. You can see some of my archery going into the Skeleton Archers. I do drop Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the Tomb Guard, just trying to whittle them down. But I just don't have that much... Earthblood. I don't have that many heals anymore, and things are definitely going a little rough. You can see I've thrown my War Dancers with Azrai Spears into the fray. They'll do okay against Tomb Guard. It's not an ideal situation for them, but with their high melee defense, they'll be hard to kill. The biggest problem here is, of course, that they will be getting debuffed by King Nikesh's Scorpion Legion, and losing their melee, a huge chunk of their melee attack or melee damage to poison. However, with Eternal Guard pushing back in, I'm also pushing my Branch Wraith into the fray. The main reason to get the Branch Wraith into the fight is because it will be able to provide that AoE plus 5 melee attack boost. Up here in the air, my Glady is kind of scouting around. I do throw her into the Skeleton Archers, just trying to disrupt them and time down. But definitely my opponent's width in this situation was just so crippling. Over here, the Wild Riders with shields do rally, actually. They do come back on very tiny amounts of HP, 1 HP after finishing Arkan, or sorry, one leadership after finishing off Arkan. So I'm not entirely sure if they'll be able to ever recover, but definitely trying to get him back into the fight. And you can see the fight in the front is definitely not going great. Some of the Tomb Guard is crumbling, definitely. But the Eternal Guard so badly beat up at this point. The Eternal Guard just can't go toe-to-toe with Tomb Guard, and so things are definitely not going great. The only great thing right now is the fact that Arkan is dead, which means my opponent's leadership is kind of tanking. Over here, these Skeleton Warriors, who are super veteraned up, are kind of holding their own. These Eternal Guard, though, are still rather healthy. The War Dancers sitting at over 106 kills, which has been chewing their way through Tomb Guard. And this actually definitely shows, I think, just how effective the War Dancers can be against Tomb Guard. I definitely think, in retrospect, what I should have done is brought some Treekin. It would have definitely helped stiffen this front line a little better. But you can see things are definitely very much still up in the air. Despite the fact that it seems like I'm whittling down the Sepulchral Stalkers a huge amount right now, it's important to keep in mind that Sepulchral Stalkers are fairly tanky. They're not losing too many models, and my archers are basically out of ammo. So while these guys will definitely take a beating, they won't be wiped out, and they can obviously start hitting my Glady and whittling her down with those poison eyeball shots or whatever they are. I'm not entirely sure what their little gaze attack there is, but they're definitely going to be laying the smackdown on me. I do push my Glady into the back of these enemy troops, trying to rout out the Tomb Guard. But you can see despite crumbling, these guys are just not disintegrating very fast. And here in the pits, things are definitely going very back and forth. However, once these Tomb Guard on the flank are wiped out with the help of the Branch Wraith, I should be able to pincer the King Nekesh's Scorpion Legion, and things will start going better. I am now throwing Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts into the melee because they are out of ammunition, and that definitely shows the desperation we're experiencing here. War Dancers with Azure Spear, as you can see, are up to 58 kills, which fighting against Tomb Guard is definitely not bad. And that definitely, I think, demonstrates, and the fact that they're being debuffed by poison to boot, I think that definitely demonstrates just how powerful these guys are against all comers, essentially. And if these guys had heavy armor, they could obviously counter that with their decent armor stats. Over here, the Sepulchral Stalkers do plow into my backline. Finally, really, my opponent's getting some use out of them. I do believe my opponent would have been better off committing them into the fight here, trying to push them through my the front of my army, or perhaps flanking around, and that definitely hurts him a little bit here. They will chew through the Starfire shots pretty quickly, but in the meantime, they are being just slowed down, and that's good for me. And I am out of ammo, so the loss isn't too great. Over here, the last of the Tomb Guard is being surrounded and beaten down by a horde of angry War Dancers with Azure Spears. Obviously, the Azure Spears will be able to probably bring these guys to heal eventually. Over here, the King Nekesh's Legion is being pincered and whittled down. My opponent is getting a bunch of those weird scatter shots up into the sky, picking away at my Glady, but I simply don't care. I'm not really going to try to juke. There's not much I can do about it. I'm simply trying to make my opponent waste his ammunition. These projectiles are actually incredibly potent against blobbed up infantry. I'm really hoping my opponent wastes his ammo on my Glady rather than slaughtering my infantry here. As you can see, she is now low on ammo. She's down to 8 rounds, but she can still kind of whittle down the Eyes of the Desert here, get a little bit of damage on him. You can see the Glade Guard once again coming into the fight to try to apply some pressure. And the Glady's still picking away at him. Still sniping away with her bow. And she's going to get hit by a few more eyeball lasers, or whatever they are. I'm not entirely sure if it's like a breath attack or if it's what exactly it is. But you can see they are starting to disintegrate, and things are finally starting to swing in my favor decisively. Get another Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the Tomb Guard, which will whittle them down a little bit. They don't have great armor, so they're kind of susceptible. And you can't see my opponent's troops will start disintegrating, and he does decide to call it a game at this point. So definitely a very tight game, and definitely a game that came down to the wire in large part because of how I misjudged the Tomb King composition potential. Going in with Wood Elves, I wasn't really thinking of the potential for infantry mobs from the Tomb Kings, because the Tomb King infantry is just so bad. I was mostly thinking about their low-end troops. I'm like, Eternal Guard can deal with Nehekaran warriors, they can deal with spears, they can deal with skeleton swordsmen. I didn't really consider the potential for a Tomb Guard spam. The Tomb Guard completely rolled over my infantry blob, with the exception of the War Dancers, who obviously can go toe-to-toe with just about anything in their cost class. They kind of slaughtered my Eternal Guard. In some cases, the Eternal Guard did hold its own, and it definitely stalled them for a good bit, but it just wasn't really up to the task. Had I thrown in a handful of Dryads, perhaps, I would have been in a better position. My opponent also made huge use of his archers. You can see some of these guys didn't get the greatest stats. Some got focused very heavily by my Glade Guard, but he was simply able to overwhelm my backline with sheer volleys of fire, with this many skeleton archers. I couldn't kill all of them, and he got massive value out of this blob of skeleton archers. You can see the 79 kills against Glade Guard. That is huge. His cavalry proved to be really inefficient, and I think this is simply a problem with the cheap cavalry against Wood Elves. I don't think it's necessarily worth bringing. I think maybe just be better off bringing Carrion because they're a little cheaper and faster, and they can actually get into the fight. Skeleton Horsemen are just very slow. They have they have 76 speed. They have atrocious melee stats, and they still count as large. So they will get shredded in melee if they try to plow into, say, War Dancers, Azrai Spears. If Wild Riders catch them, and the Wild Riders can catch them, they will get massacred. And they're just not a great unit, in my opinion. And if you're trying to just tie your opponent down, you're better off, in general, bringing Carrion than you are bringing Skeleton Horsemen. As mentioned, they're cheaper, they're faster, they have a good. They can just fly over in melee troops. Plus, they do count as small, so Azrai Spears will struggle to shut them down, which is not true for the Skeleton Horsemen, who can just get massacred that way. The Eyes of the Desert, I think my opponent definitely made a slight mistake in not committing them earlier, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure how he could have committed them. One of the problems with Sepulchral Stalkers is just how slow they are. They only have 50 speed, and so when there's not much potential to flank, when there's not much potential to shut down the Wild Riders, they're just not that great. Definitely an interesting choice of unit, and perhaps would have had potential had the fight been placed on a more open expanse rather than on a choke point like that. But definitely didn't work out too well. So you can see Tomb Guard very potent. Definitely an interesting composition. My opponent's biggest mistake in this game, I think, was not maxing out Archon. Had my opponent had that heal, the Tomb Blade of Archon for those heals, had he been able to spam his spells a little bit more, had he brought Spirit Leech to whittle down some of my other troops, for example, he could have tried to snipe the Branch Wraith off, something like that with Spirit Leech. Had he had that +5 melee attack AoE buff from Archon, I think he would have been in a much better position. I think it's, even if you're trying to go very wide with Tomb Kings and you bring Archon, it's still worth bringing some of his buffs. His +5 melee attack, melee defense is huge on the rather poor stats of the skeletons. His that heal, the Blade of Archon, is just so good. So great game to my opponent. I think that was really his one major mistake. My mistake, of course, not preparing for infantry spam. Had I brought Dryads or had I brought more War Dancers, I would have been in a better spot. But once again, that exposes you to some nasty fire from the Skeleton Archers. So definitely going to have to work a little bit more on improving my Wood Elf strat, and hopefully we'll see what I can come up with. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, or anything like that, be sure to post it down, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.